Hello, my spooky friends. This is John, your host of Nightland Frights in the spookier podcast, Nightland Frights. And I wanted to thank all my spooky friends out there for listening. I truly appreciate it. Please like and subscribe and rate us 5 stars. It helps me make this a better podcast. And make sure you comment what guests you would like me to have on, what topics you would like me to talk about. It's only going to make this podcast better. So again, thank you so much for listening. And please go to my Patreon. Check that out. Become a Parascani for only $3, a spooky friend for $1. And remember, stay spooky. Hello, my spooky friends. This is John, your host of Nightland Frights, the paranormal podcast that covers everything spooky, creepy, and mysterious in the Midwest. And, you know, I love to have different guests on and everything because one of the greatest things to do is kind of learn from different people. And one of the things I love, especially guests, to have on is authors, because not only do they have to do a ton of research for their books, which, okay, maybe that's not the fun part, Vicki, but on my show today is author Vicki Joe Anderson. Thank you, Vicki, for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm excited about this one, John. I'm not in the Midwest now, but I did spend most of my life born and raised in Minnesota.
Oh, nice. So you've gotten rid of your accent.
You know what?
Yeah, hey,
first of all, thank you for saying that. You know, it's funny. One of the words I avoid most is Minnesota, because that's what the
Minnesota.
I think I lucked out. Right after I was born, we moved to the East Coast, and I was there for 5, 6, 7 years. I don't know. So we moved back when I was about 8 years old, and at that time I had a really thick Philly accent. And so it wasn't quite Jersey, wasn't quite Massachusetts, but it was like, you know, the daughter, that kind of thing. And so I actually got made fun of in elementary school because of my weird East Coast accent. So I think because we did move around a lot, and because my formative years and like where I learned to read and write was on the East Coast, I sort of avoided the really thick, sort of stereotypical Minnesota accent. A lot of times, if people are really listening, they'll, more than Minnesota, I'll have people say, "Are you from Wisconsin?" To which I object. No, I'm just kidding. I was kind of, you know, in Minnesotans and the Wisconsinites, we have to kind of, you know, tease each other's heads out.
It's like this weird, like, and you know, the funny thing about it is we can make fun of each other, but if some people are like making fun of us, we're like, "Hey man, that's not cool. You can't say that."
Oh, I know, like family, I know, right? I think Minnesotans have we spend, I think, a lot more time making fun of the Iowans. It's more the sports rivalry. When it gets into like the football and stuff, then it's more the Wisconsin stuff. But yeah.
By the way, I'm a huge Packers fan, so be careful.
Yeah. I was never into football. I don't get too heated over that. But my favorite Iowa joke, I'll just share this with your Midwest listeners. What's the best thing to come out of Iowa?
I don't know what.
35W North.
I love it.
That's great. Good. Oh. Hey, some of my very dearest friends are from Iowa, and including one of my college roommates. So it's a fun-loving rivalry.
Let's talk, Vicki. I'm going to talk a little bit about you. And please, you know, like we were talking offline here, fill in the gaps and everything. Like you said, you're from Minnesota, where you received your Bachelor of Science degree in English with a writing emphasis, which is always good. And you said your mother was a talented writer. So did your mom kind of give you, I don't know, the urge or the desire to write?
No, it was sort of a coincidence. You know, when you're a kid, your parents don't have lives. You don't have, the world revolves around you. You have no idea what your parents are up to, right? And when I was 10 years old, so in 5th grade, now up to this point, I loved reading and I loved, you know, poetry and things like that. But I had a 5th grade teacher and named Ms. Cannon from Cedar Park Elementary School in Apple Valley, Minnesota. And this teacher had told my parents during a parent-teacher conference that I had a proficiency for creative writing. And at that point in my life, I was 10 years old and I was never noticed in school. Like I was never like a teacher's pet. I did well, like I got good grades, but I was not athletic. I wasn't musical. I wasn't creative. So to actually have a teacher notice something about me, and she would encourage it in front of the class, and I would write things and she would read it to the class and she would tell the class, how good it was. And so I think I was just it was just such a new experience as just, all of us, most of us as kids, we just blend into the woodwork, not too many of us are prodigies, at 10 years old. So for me, it was just so amazing to get positive attention, because up to that point, and this will play in later into my story, I had surgeries since the day I was born. So a lot of the attention I got as a child is, oh, what's wrong? What happened to you? And so it was empathetic, but it was a lot of self-pity and it was negative. And, to have someone actually notice something in me as a child that it was something that I excelled in. So I just went with it. And my parents were very, very encouraging of it. And it was at that point that my mom told me, I've wanted to be a writer my whole life. And that's when she opened up that part of her world to me. And my mom and I'm speaking in the past since she passed away in 2013, but, my mom was an extraordinary writer. The stuff that she wrote, it was beautiful. She could write young adult fiction. She could write poetry. She could write encouragement, like self-improvement, devotional kind of stuff. And her stuff was very lovely, beautiful. And so where I think our writing styles really differ, because, my mom once told me every single thing a writer writes is autobiographical. Even if you're writing fiction, even if you're writing research, there's no such thing as not having a little bit of that writer's life or perspective or worldview or interests coming through. So my writing was a little bit more jagged, a little bit more sandpaper, needed sandpaper around the edges, and so I always kind of thought I'll never be a writer like my mom, because my mom writes such beautiful things. And a lot of the things that I wrote they weren't edgy or graphic, but they showed life through the lenses of someone who had been broken, someone who had been through trauma, someone who saw, it's not that the glass is half empty, but the glass can be full to the brim, but the glass is maybe got a nice crack in it, right?
Sure, right.
So it was interesting. She always kind of saw my writing as, oh, wow, I wish I could write like you. And I was always like, well, I wish I could write like you. But I think what it is as writers, I think when we find another writer that we really love and we marvel, I think what the writers that we love are the ones that we feel, I could never have written that. Like, it's almost like an awe. It's like when you're in awe of someone else's writing. So it's not necessarily that one's better or one's more gifted. It's that I think writers have the ability to appreciate when they see other writing that's good. You almost love the people that are better than you. And so I always looked at my mom's writing like that. Like, I wish that I could write something beautiful. But what's really interesting, John, is what I really wanted is I saw that my mom's writing helped people. And so it wasn't so much that it was beautiful, it's that it was helpful and it was an encouragement. And so even though the things that I write about might not be beautiful, in fact, they get really dark. I write about a lot of ancient Sumerian gods and vampiric things and threshold covenants and sleep paralysis. But in the long run, if my book is helping people that are stuck in this and they don't understand it, or they don't know how to get over it, or they're being harassed by it, and if they're, a targeted individual, then it's not that the writing is beautiful or it's edgy. It's that if our writing is used to uplift other people and it brings them out of a dark place, then it's beautiful in its own way.
Yes, that is well said, because I think I'm a big movie guy, and I'm actually a screenwriter.
Okay.
And I've been optioned and everything, and hopefully have some movies coming out in the near future.
Nice.
But one of the biggest things is, like you said, I wrote a screenplay about a guy who wanted to commit suicide, so he hired a hit woman to kill him. and they fall in love because they realize they both have screwed up lives. Like you said, like their lives, but throughout the movie, they learn from each other and they're like, you know what? We're not much different. I don't like what I do. I want to die, but I want you to live. And that's what I think too, when you're watching a movie, you're reading a book, you read an article where you look at it and you go, I've never looked at it that way. Right. I've never looked at it from that point of view, or just makes you stop and go, well, maybe my life isn't that bad. Even if something that simple, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe I'm not, dealing with cancer and have 5 months to live, right? Something that tragic and that sad. And that person is still going out and helping people, even though they can barely get out of bed. And I'm complaining about, I have to go to work in the morning. I'm perfectly healthy.
I know.
Like what, like, all right. Kind of that you think about that. And so I love that. No, let me ask you something else. This has really intrigued me. I'm just reading off your website. You said you deal, as you do, with spiritual, I'm just quoting here. You deal with spiritual warfare and topics that are on the edges of the fringe. Now, talk a little bit about that, because I was looking at your books, and I'll share that on my episode when the episode comes out, all your links and everything. But talk a little bit about spiritual warfare, and you like saying dealing with like some of this very dark stuff. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I'm a little bit of a misfit, John, and
so
I was raised in the church. And so you think of where the church was in the 70s and the 80s, right? And it's kind of this very leave it to beaver sort of a thing. And what ended up happening in our generation with the church is all of the meaty, weighty, supernatural G stuff sort of got scrubbed out of the Bible. So when you were going to church in the 70s and 80s, it was all on the grace of God and the love of God and the forgiveness of God. And we're all going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya and sit around campfires and all the silliness. And so it was a really bizarre, cerebral gleaning process for me growing up, listening to all this stuff and thinking, okay, it's not that I disbelieve or am offended or disgusted with what I'm hearing. Like I understand and I believe, in this concept that there is a seed war going on, so to speak, since Genesis. If you go back to Genesis, when Adam and Eve fell, there's now a good and evil. There's a dark side and there's the two different colored lightsabers now as of Genesis 3, right? And there's enmity now between this seed and that seed. And so you really miss in modern Christianity that this is actually a supernatural cosmic war film going on, right? And so what didn't make sense to me when you scrub out the fact that there's a cosmic war going on behind the veil and humanity is sort of this cannon fodder in the middle of it all, right? What you miss out on when all you hear every Sunday is how wonderful everything is and Jesus heals everybody and everything's great and he answers all your prayers. Well, when you're a kid and you're getting teased every day in school and you're going to Christian schools and the kids are bullying you and calling you ugly and you're getting beat up and boys are, kicking you in the stomach and dragging you to the boys' bathroom and laughing at you, and you're praying and you're asking God to spare you from the bullying. And then meanwhile, all of my summers were in the hospital. I would go into surgery. I'd have surgery in June. Serious reconstructive surgery on my face. So my summers would be laid up on the couch with my eyes and ice packs on my head and all this crap. And I couldn't go out and play. And they were usually doing some sort of bone or skin graft from somewhere else in my body. So there'd be a rib or a hip or something. So I wouldn't be able to walk and you'd be on all this drowsy pain killing medication. And so then you'd end up, 2-3 months isn't really enough time to recover from surgeries that bad. You're pretty beat up. You're pretty black and blue. So you'd start school sometimes with, and because of the nature, like I had this main scar that kind of ran up my nose and up my forehead. So I could not have looked more like the cliche Frankenstein. So it's like the Frankenstein, the Freddy Krueger, the Scarface, like all of these kind of like names. So the dichotomy that I was sort of living in is I was being raised under this worldview that everything in life is hunky-dory. And as long as you've got Jesus, all your problems go away and everything's great. And it was not my reality. And here I am at this Christian school where people are meaner than mean. And it was, I was really in survival mode. And I'm not complaining, John, that 18 years of public and private school and surgeries made me a super tough cookie with a really thick skin.
I bet.
And so one of the reasons I can do what I can do and be in spiritual warfare type ministries and things is because I don't have a lot of fear. There's probably times when I should have more than I do, but spiritual warfare is something that a lot of people in the church, they don't talk about it much anymore. A lot of people, even in the church, they're afraid of it. They don't want to be confronting demonic powers. They have this exorcism, Linda Blair kind of view that anytime someone is demonized, this pea soup is going to get spit in your face and spin around and all this stuff. And, so a lot of spiritual warfare that's being taught in the church is really bad information. And it's really glorifying the wrong side of the event. You know what I mean? There's a lot of, there's so much emphasis on the power of the demons and how cool the demons are and what are all the demons' names. And I see a lot of lack of love. If you have a gift of relieving people of demonization and you know how to do that, you have the ability when you see someone traumatized and terrorized by that, you understand how to get those things out of them. And you lollygag for hours and hours because you want to talk to the demons in them. That's just pure selfishness. Like, help that person, like get it out of the person. Right. So I just see so many mistakes being made. And like you see these, exorcisms that are done like in church sanctuaries with hundreds of people there and the person will stagger up front. And anybody that knows anything about demonization, all you have to know is the one story in the New Testament where Jesus sent the demons from the demoniac into the pigs, right? When a demon is cast out, they will hop into the next living thing. They need a host, right?
Right.
So if you're in a church or in a situation where there's hundreds of other people there and none of them are vetted, you don't have no idea if those people have opened any doors or if they're susceptible. As soon as you cast a demon out of someone, they're just going to go into the person 3 pews back who are ripe for the picking.
Yeah.
Another thing too is you really can't, if a demon has permission or a legal right to be in a person's life, and you're just casting something out of them to do them a favor, but they have done nothing to reverse that open door. It says in scripture that 7 times the demons will come back to that person. And so I just see a lot of lack of knowledge in this area in the church. I see a lot of fear. This is another thing that I see a lot of. I see a lot of people who feel called into that type of ministry, but when it comes down to it, they're afraid to do it because they know that there's a lot of unconfessed sin in their own life that they don't want to deal with. And they're afraid, I don't want to get exposed because these demons, they're smart. They know. And they're afraid, what if I am in a scenario where I'm, doing a deliverance and the demon turns on me and said, we've all seen too many horror movies. The vampires are always laughing hysterically at these priests with their little medallions saying like, you have to have faith for that to work. And I think a lot of people, they understand that their faith falls short. And, so they have a fear. And that's, I think, another huge misconception in the church of deliverance ministry. It's not about how strong your faith is or how perfect you are or how many good works you've done or, look at the disciples who were given the ability to cast out demons. Those guys were a mess. I mean, they were stealing from the coffers and betraying Jesus. And I mean, they were a mess, right? They were jealous of each other and fighting over who got to sit next to Jesus in eternity and all that.
Yeah.
They were normal human beings. They were given an anointing. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand. Deliverance ministry isn't a gift that certain people are given. Everyone who walks with Jesus has that anointing. Everyone has this anointing. They should be able to cast out demons and heal the sick and do all those things. And I don't think that it has to do with, I don't think it's that the spirit isn't around anymore or that gift has passed. I think that the church has been so bereft of good biblical teaching over the last 40, 50, 60, 70 years that the really exciting stuff that's in the Bible that we are culturally and contextually and sort of linguistically and historically separated from, there are aspects of scripture that if we could go back into the first century and read the New Testament as a first century Semitic individual, you wouldn't even recognize Christianity. If the Apostle Paul came back from the dead and sat in an evangelical church, I believe that not only would he not recognize his own books being preached, but that he would probably think he was in a pagan temple. And that doesn't mean that all Christians and Catholics are, hypocrites and all that stuff. What I'm saying is we're so divorced from the context and the culture and the history and the language and the geography of the text that we don't understand how mind-bogglingly supernatural the book is. And I'm not talking about the miracles like water into wine. And, I'm talking about there are amazing mystical, supernatural, and downright occult activities going on. If you think that Joseph and Daniel, these people that held second in command positions in the courts of Egypt and Babylon, these magi's and things that they were dealing with, they were full on occultists doing black magic. They knew about the Book of the Dead and the Emerald tablets, and Moses knew all that stuff. And if you go into the logistics and the blueprints of the Ark of the Covenant and the materials it was made out of and how the priests all had to wear linen and they couldn't touch it, and you would understand the electromagnetic properties of that thing and just the supernatural aspects of the manna that they ate in the wilderness and that their sandals never wore out, and the length of the lives that they lived, the Cain knowledge they had about longevity. It said that Caleb fought the armies of the Philistines and the Canaanites in his 80s. And he had the strength of a young man. And we just read that in the church, it's almost like all those passages, you just think, well, Jesus is a miracle worker and he has this little magic wand and he just did all these little miracles. And so their sandals didn't wear out and they lived longer. Right. And I like to use this analogy. There was this funny Dilbert cartoon one time, and it was like these three cells. So Dilbert was in this business meeting, and there were three easels, and there was one easel that had like a light bulb on it, like here's our bright idea. And then the third easel had like a piggy bank on it with all this money coming out of it. So in other words, we've got this innovative idea and it's going to make us millions. So then the middle, there's always this black box in the middle. How do you get from A to C, right? And in the middle is just a crude outline drawing of a pair of underwear. Right? Meaning your guess is as good as mine, how we're going to turn this bright idea into $1 million, right? And sometimes I feel comically a little bit I think this is why Christianity isn't taken seriously in our modern culture, where people are educated and they are taught logic and they're taught scientific method. And I do think that the Bible stands up under all that scrutiny. We're just not taught how to do it. So when you're asked about, say, for example, hey, there seems to be some discrepancies in the creation story in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. So it's either a total contradiction, or how do you explain this being the inerrant word of God when you've clearly got two creation scenarios here? And the only thing that the church teaches you to say is, it's the same story. This is just like a close up. But it doesn't make sense that some of the things are created on a different day, and some of the things are already there, and some of the pronouns that are used are not the same, and some of the commands that were given to the day 6 creation were not given to Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve seemed to have a different job. The day 6 creation seemed to be told to be fruitful and multiply, whereas Adam and Eve they were supposed to tend the garden, and they were not. If you read Genesis 2 very closely, Adam and Eve are never told to be fruitful and multiply. Adam and Eve are never told that if you read it closely. And so when highly educated people come to Christians with this kind of stuff, we spit out our coffee cup cliche. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't satisfy. And the fact is, if you actually delve into those questions, you start reading people like Gary Wayne and Derek Gilbert, and they start answering those questions from a scientific and an intellectual. They give real answers to, like, this is why it looks like there's a discrepancy there. Let's fill in the gaps. And you realize that the supernatural and the arcane has been stripped out of the Bible, and it's been turned kind of into this. Everything's at like a Sunday school level. Everything's at a primary level. Like, I always think it's hilarious that Noah's Ark has been reduced to like the decor for baby nurseries. I mean, it's like, it's the equivalent of like putting up wallpaper in your kid's like room with like Ed Gein and, you know, serial killers and Dahmer and stuff like that, you know, and putting a mobile over their crib of like electric chairs and stuff. Like, you know, here's a story in scripture where watcher angels transport themselves through a portal on Mount Hermon down to earth, mingle with human women, give birth to demigods, and destroy the creation to a point where God has to basically wipe the whole earth out with the judgment. And then we're like just decorating our babies' nurseries with it. Like, it's just a silly little story with the cute animals. So it's just amazing to me how we have taken one of the most mind-blowingly exciting books in the world that has all sorts of answers to questions that we've been asking. Yeah. And I don't know how pastors have managed to make that Bible the most boring book on the planet, but kudos to you, because you've done it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And that's something, thank you, that's very fascinating. I'm always intrigued by that. I love history. I'm a big history person. To me, the Bible is history, whether you want to look at it one way or another, but it is. One thing I want to do eventually, I've been saying this for months, is, but and before we get to our topic today, just really quickly, one of the things I always have an issue with is the satanic panic, because we were both alive during that.
Yes.
And people went to jail, okay? You know, and spent years in jail over what? Again, it comes back to what you're saying. Nobody really stepped back and said, hold it. Okay, let's look at this from a different point of view, from a scientific point of view, from a philosophy. No, it just was like, you got the demon in you, so you did that to that little kid and hurt them. We have no proof that you did that, and you're going to jail. And obviously that can, as we know, that can go to religious people too. And that's something I've always wanted to do, that topic, have an extended podcast on there, because again, everything coming from the satanic panic, most of it was lies. People came forward and said, yeah, I lied, or I was coerced, or I was this, or I was that, right? It was one thing after another. And that's what sometimes happens with biblical studies or other historical studies. People, like you said, they just kind of give the, hey, let's decorate our room with demon heads because it's cute and it's whatever. And we're not looking at, like, okay, did you really look at it? Did you take the time? No, it's like, let's do it. And again, not to get too much on that topic, Vicki, because I want to talk about your book. Does that really, it must, like, not bug you, but kind of irritate you, right? It must at least irritate you when people are like, it's this vanilla, and you're like, okay, where do you start, right? That must be super hard.
Exactly. Well, and especially with the topic at hand, when we're talking about sleep paralysis, and, you know, a big reason why I decided to write the book, is because so much of what's out there is disinformation. Some of it willful, some of it unwillful. I think some people are out there are, you know, doing a lot of copy pasting, and they think that they're really disseminating information. And unfortunately, like most things, the people that sort of own the narrative on sleep paralysis are not people that have experienced it. And I just want to differentiate too. There's a lot of people that have had sleep paralysis once or twice in life, maybe during a really stressful time, or after a divorce, or during puberty, and or, you know, they were playing with a Ouija board or whatever. So everybody's kind of got like maybe one or two stories of like one time where I couldn't wake up, I couldn't move. And there's a lot of people that have had it that have no memory of it. what the book is, what I'm aiming at in my book is the people that have had it for decades, numerous times, night after night. And they're targeted individuals, and it is being melded in with, out of body experiences and, astral abductions, out of body experiences, alien, UFO, abductee phenomena, things like that. So I'm really kind of, honing in on the people that have been very tormented by it. But when you go online, in the past, it was a lot of gaslighting by way of these people are all schizophrenic. They have a sleep disorder. They're mentally ill. They're drug addicts. They're delusional. Now it's kind of changing in our culture. There's still gaslighting, but now it's just turning into a joke. Like now there's all these memes about, must sleep paralysis demon be like, it's just kind of something funny. And people are like intentionally guzzling back bottles of Benadryl so they can trip balls and see the Hat Man. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, now it's just becoming kind of like a social media phenomenon, nobody takes it seriously. And so it's kind of really similar to what you just said about the satanic panic. You've got millions of people that jump on a bandwagon and want their 15 minutes of fame, and they'll joke about it, and they'll talk about how, oh yeah, I drank the whole bottle of Benadryl and I saw the Hat Man, or I did my ayahuasca trip and it was the scariest thing in the world, but now I know the meaning of life. Like everybody is like, wants that kind of experience. But here's the thing. The people that are really harassed by sleep paralysis, the people that are being tormented by it, the people who are being remote viewed, the people who are involved in this on a military or an occult level, they're not the ones that want to get online and cavalierly talk about it. Anytime you get someone online and they're like, yeah, and so like, Lilith came after me and she was so scary. She was so ugly. And it's like, dude, this isn't something that we capitalize.
Yeah.
Those things don't need any more attention, than they're already getting. And it's like, those are the people that aren't being tormented by it. And it's the same thing with like the occultists. If you want to talk about the underground people involved in generational Satanism, the ones who really are doing the rituals and the ones who really are trafficking the kids, you will never see them on television, John. They are not looking to be known. These are the guys in 3-piece suits who are teaching your kids Sunday school every Sunday. And I'm not joking. That's not a metaphor. The real dangerous occultists who really will, traumatize children and ritualize them and sacrifice them. They do exist, but they're underground. They're not going to show up on TV with black nail polish and black color. I have my like Clairol black hair dye and, my little Metallica t-shirt, those guys are jokes.
Yeah, dog collar.
Come on, you guys. Like a real occultist is not looking for attention. A real survivor of satanic ritual abuse is not looking for attention. And a real sleep paralysis sufferer is not looking for attention. No. In fact, most of them are looking to stay off the radar because if you're targeted, you're being harassed constantly. You're not looking for more attention or you're not looking to make people mad. So, this is, I think, an area of discernment. Now that we're in an era where people are very titillated, we are now in an era where inside and outside of the church, demons are popular. Everybody's got their Baphomet t-shirt and everybody knows who Aleister Crowley is now and Anton LaVey, and they know all this stuff. They're fascinated by it. We know about the cryptids and the dogmen and the Bigfoot. This is a in vogue topic right now. It's the pendulum swing. It was the obvious teen 80s pendulum swing from satanic panic to this stuff is so cool. And so, what we're really losing sight of is that the real individuals who are being tormented, whether it's satanic ritual abuse, whether it's militarized remote viewing, whether it's UFO abductees, whether it's sleep paralysis, these people are being lost in the fray of all of the caricatures. And so as the media creates this spin on it, that everybody who talks like this is on drugs or they're mentally ill or they're schizophrenic or they want 15 minutes of fame. what happens then is all of the people who are faking it, like there's like this trend. I don't know if it's still going on now, but there was this trend on TikTok a year or two ago where all of these little Gen Zers were getting on there bragging about all of their alter personalities. And it's like, we've got no place now where we're going to brag that we have like MPA, like MPD, DID. And the fact of the matter is, because I've spoken and I know many people with DID who were split because of trauma and trauma-based ritual stuff. They're not aware of all their alters. They don't always know. And you don't just say like, well, now I'd like you to meet Billy. Billy talks like this and he likes football. Right. Like it's such a joke. I mean, and so again, for these people that want their 15 minutes of fame, you are spoiling the whole batch of apples by just making the collective conscious think that all of this is made up and silly and stupid and attention getting. And then meanwhile, there's a very small percentage of the population that when they come out and they really want help, they're booed out of the auditorium because they're saying all the same. Oh, I saw that on a television show. Oh, I saw that on a movie. And so it really is brilliant how they have flooded the collective conscious with a belief that all of this is just ridiculous. And it's a way of keeping the targeted individuals even more isolated and further from ever getting any help.
Absolutely. So let's just back up a little bit. I want to tell my spooky friends, Vicki, about your book. They only come out at night. Please order. I ordered it. I don't have it here yet, but it will be here. I wanted to hold it up and tell you I got it, but it didn't come yet, but that's okay. I'll do it another time. But one of the biggest things when you wrote that book, what surprised you the most when you were doing your research? You kind of brought that up, but what did you go, wow, that's so shocking?
a couple of things. The first shock, when you've gone through it, so I don't know if I've said this on the air. I think I said it before the air. Yeah. This started for me around 3 years old. So yes, obviously,
please talk about that.
Yeah. So I wasn't outward. I wasn't, at slumber parties playing with Ouija boards and walking through graveyards saying, "Who? What is your name?" Like I wasn't conjuring it. Right? And I, I was raised in a Christian home. My parents were married and they were faithful to one another. There wasn't any alcohol. I mean, it was pretty Leave It to Beaver. So, I mean, I know my parents weren't perfect, but I really don't think that there was anything, real controversial going on that would have, opened the doors like to that. Right. I've told this on other podcasts, but, we did live in a house in about 1975. I was like 3 and my brother was 5. And it was a rental and my dad had a job out there and it was in a, pretty lofty Fairfax, Virginia neighborhood. And I didn't know it at the time because I was a kid, but most of our neighbors were Pentagon officials. They worked, for the Pentagon. Now, my dad did not. That wasn't his position, but, he wasn't in the military or in the government. A lot of strange things happened in that house. There was a lot of paranormal activity. My brother had night terrors. He sleptwalked. I had the sleep paralysis. There were just weird experiences. And we ended up finding out after we had moved out from a neighbor. A neighbor ended up asking my mom, did anything ever weird ever happen in the house? And my mom was a very cards to her vest, private, introverted, Scandinavian type of a person. And she was very quiet. She was not a gossipy woman. She was just a very classy woman who kind of had a poker face. So my mom's like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? And, the woman said, well, the rumor around the neighborhood is that house is haunted because you rented it from a satanic high priest. And that we've heard that he does rituals in the basement. Now at 1975, I don't know where my parents' knowledge base was, like if they even took that seriously or what that meant to them. Obviously we went to church and we believed in the devil, but I don't know in the 1970s if people really understood or believed that there were high priests and warlocks and stuff like that. I don't know.
Right.
So I don't really know if that really made sense to us until a lot later. But my guess is, going with the cliche Hollywood, haunted house story, that would make sense to me why a 3-year-old is having sleep paralysis all of a sudden. But who knows? I also had a lot of trauma as a kid. Again, it wasn't physical abuse or sexual abuse or dysfunction in my home. It was all the surgeries. Like when you are exposed to that, I mean, I practically was raised in the hospital till I was 15. And so that's traumatizing as a kid, you know? So trauma is one of those pieces where it's present in almost every sleep paralysis story you hear with people who have had it their whole life. And it's one of those, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did the sleep paralysis traumatize them, or did the trauma open the door for the sleep paralysis? Like, who knows? Like, which came first? But they do seem to go hand in hand, and they work really nicely with each other. Because then what you have is you have a kid who's traumatized. So they either are in a home where there's no safety, there's abuse, or there's dysfunction, or they're getting bullied at school, or they're in a hospital all the time. And then the one place where they could probably be safe, in their own bedroom at night, asleep, they're also getting tormented. So it just becomes like this trauma on trauma kind of a thing. So the first surprise for me, to answer your question, is when I was first commissioned to write a couple articles on sleep paralysis for Real Dark News. It's a website, realdarknews.com. I was like, well, this will be a breeze. I've had this my entire life. I've had this off and on for 45 years at this point, you know. And so I sat down to write the article, and as my fingertips were about to hit the keys, this little voice in my head said, "Don't regurgitate." And I was like, huh? And it dawned on me, you know what? We were taught, those of us who were in elementary school in the 70s and 80s, this is how we were taught to research. We were brought to the school library. You picked a topic. You got the World Book Encyclopedia. You read the page or two on that topic, and then you rewrote the article in your own words so that it wasn't plagiarism. So basically what we were learning, we weren't learning to research, and we weren't learning to write. We were learning how to copy and paste already available information in a way that wasn't legally plagiarism. That's how we were being taught to write and research. And so what I felt like when it said don't regurgitate is, if it's already out on the internet, don't write it, because it's already available. Like, you know, you have sleep paralysis, you know what it is, you know what some of the entities are, but why? Where is it coming from? Who are the players? Why are they targeting some people and not others? Because in the church, again, what you hear in the church is, if you have this kind of stuff happen to you, you opened a door, you did something, you played with the Ouija board, you cheated on a spouse, you must be into pornography. So it's your fault. You did this. Right. And so where it gets difficult when it starts happening to you at 3 years old is, okay, what if I, haven't played with a Ouija board or looked at porn? And how come I know people that have done both of those things and 100 things more and have never had it? So the logic just doesn't line up statistically with the actual people suffering from it. And so I realized, I can't believe this. I've had this my entire life, which should mean I'm an expert on it.
Yeah.
I have no idea what this is or why it targeted me or what's going on. The biggest shock for me was realizing I don't know. Then the goal became not writing an article. The goal became, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure this out.
Yeah.
And I went about it. I did some of the stuff. Like I did a lot of reading. I read a lot of crap. I researched, and I really didn't start understanding a lot of what it was until I started, and I don't recommend this for everybody. And I know there's going to be church people that are freaking out on me now, but if you want to know about sleep paralysis and the demon world, the church isn't going to tell you.
No.
Science isn't going to tell you. Medicine's not going to tell you. The internet's not going to tell you. The only people that are going to tell you the truth about what sleep paralysis is the New Age and the occult. And it's dangerous because I had no desire to get into either one of those things. I wanted to know what was going on.
Sure.
And so I started reading all that stuff. And in addition, I was doing a lot of praying, and I was even fasting, because what I felt like I had puzzle pieces. I always felt like I had like 5 or 6 puzzle pieces on the table, and I was shuffling them around, and I knew that the pieces all connected, but I was missing all the pieces that connected them. And so every time I would hit a brick wall, I would stop, and I had a prayer team, and I had people praying for me, and I would fast. I would literally go without food, and I would implore God to give me explain to me what this is. And I think it took me, I'd been researching sleep paralysis for many, many years, but the actual research for the book took another year. So it was another year of researching and writing just to get it down on paper. So the biggest surprise was figuring out that I really didn't know. The second biggest surprise for me was a lot of the stuff that I wrote in the book. And if you're a writer or you're a painter or an artist or a poet, you'll know what I'm talking about. Like as a script writer and as a filmmaker, I think you'll understand this too.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying anything mystical here at all. There's something about our brains when we write something, we can reconstruct a sentence. And as a writer, you'll read the sentence and you're like, that's not quite right.
Yeah.
You can't explain why, but you just know it's not right. Yeah, and so you move the words around and stuff and you're like, it's better, not quite right. And you fumble with the same sentence or paragraph. And there's just a point. I can't explain it, but there's just a point where you're like, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Right? And it's the same thing with painters. How do you just put colors on canvas and like, oh, nope, that's wrong. Where's the turpentine? No, this needs one more stroke here. Like there's just something in the brain where we just know when we know. Right. And so as I'm writing this book, I just folded the crap out of every chapter until I just knew that what was down was right. Grammatically, it was right. And structure wise, it was right. And it had all the alliteration and the humor in it. And it was written well. But I didn't have, this isn't math. I don't have a calculator where I can check my work. When you're trying to figure out things in the spirit realm.
Yes.
And you're talking about beings and entities that have lived thousands of years longer than us. They know the human psychology like the back of their hand. There's just things that we're not going to know unless they're divinely revealed to us, right? Because we're looking at one or two facets of a diamond that has all of these facets, and we only can see a couple of them. And so we're at a loss for putting all the pieces together. So the biggest surprise for me was after I sent the book off to the publisher, even though I knew that it was the right stuff, because I was writing stuff that had never been written before and I was connecting dots, I was taking things very disconnected and saying these are connected. Now, you got to be careful when you do that, because then people can start saying like, oh, when you start connecting things that aren't there, you're a conspiracy theory. You have apophenia. It's a beginning stages of schizophrenia. You're connecting all these things and they're not connected. And so there was a little bit of hesitancy in me thinking people are going to say, you have no way to prove that this and this and this is connected, right? What has been really the most exciting process to me in this whole journey has been in the 2 years or so since the book has been out. The more I get onto podcasts and talk to people like you who have also been talking about this stuff and exploring this stuff and researching this. And we're talking about people that have given a lot of thought into this stuff. They haven't just watched a couple horror movies. And these are people who have experienced it and who have been confounded over the things that they've seen and experienced that they don't have explanations for. So we're talking about intelligent people who want real answers. They're not just telling creepypasta stories. They're not just in it for the goosebumps, right? What's been incredible to me as I have spoken to other people, hundreds of other people, whether podcast hosts or people that have contacted me, is the further away I get from the publication of the book, the more other people are confirming that everything that I wrote was 100% on the mark. Now, that doesn't mean that as more information is disclosed, this won't get bigger and bigger. I always tell people there's no such thing as a sleep paralysis expert, even if you've had it for 47 years. There's no such thing as an expert because we don't really know what we're dealing with. And we can read a bunch of books on the astral realm and on aliens and UFO abductions, and we can get a lot of information and we can get a lot of people corroborating. But at the end of the day, how do we know, John? I mean, it's asleep in some lab somewhere. We don't know we don't even know it's real anymore. So how in the world would we know? Oh yeah, I know where the astral realm is and I know exactly what it is. And I mean, I can't even tell you how many times during sleep paralysis I got pulled into the astral realm and got lost in that stupid shopping mall. I'm so sick of that stupid shopping mall up in the astral realm. And you're looking for your car and you're meeting all these weirdos up there. Like, I can't even tell you how many times I've been there, but I can't tell you with any certainty. I can spit back stuff I've read, but there's so much disinformation out there. And I really think that the best sort of shot we have at understanding this stuff is continuing collectively as a group to talk about it, to give the benefit of the doubt to the people who are sharing their experiences. There's always going to be people, there's always going to be trolls that come in and make it up and want their attention, you know?
Yeah.
But one of the things that I start my book out with this, and I really do mean it. I really wish that we could get over ourselves and we could get people at the table that have completely opposing worldviews. We can get doctors, scientists, pastors, priests, rabbis, atheists, occultists, because we all have pieces of the puzzle. We're all wrong about stuff. We're all really blinded. We have blind spots about our own worldviews. But I'm not saying we have to come to the table and all agree with one another. Like, I mean, there's no value in tolerating someone who you have no tolerance for. Pretending to tolerate someone else's worldview and then going home and telling everybody what an idiot they were, it's of no value. But if we could actually sit down and say like, hey, I'm going to leave this table with my worldview and my belief system intact, but I really want to understand your experience. I really want to know what you experienced when you got abducted and your pregnancies are missing 6 months later. I really want to know what you mean when you talk about disassociation and how other alters came forward and took trauma for you that I want to know what it means when you can't remember anything that happened to you between the ages of 5 and 10. Like, you know, it's easy to write that kind of stuff off. And I've dealt with some people, John. You know, there's always the people that call and say, I've had sleep paralysis and I wake up and I can't move and I see a shadow figure. And I'm like, yeah, you know, we've heard that one a million times, right?
Right.
But then you get the people on the other end of the call and you hear the fear in their voice. And they say they're going to call you back and they never do because they're terrified. They tell you stuff that happened to them where you think, I might actually lose my life if I help this person because of the high level of people that are, those are the kinds of people that are really key to understanding this. And unfortunately, their stories can be so not just scary, they can be unbelievable, but also for those of us with empathy.
Yeah.
You have to have a level of empathetic separation. And I'm making that phrase up. You have to genuinely empathize with other human beings who have gone through trauma, but separate yourself from it to the degree that your whole life isn't ruined just hearing their story.
Yeah.
And these are really the kind of people I would love to help, John. And I don't know if I'm even equipped at this point to do it.
Sure.
I have a lot of friends who are equipped to do it. But this is really what it comes down to is I'm not interested in talking on the phone with a bunch of people who excitedly tell me about their sleep paralysis stories because they're sort of titillated by it.
Yeah.
And that's what's kind of crazy about it too, John. There are people that, it's kind of similar to like people who drink. Nobody wants the hangover. Nobody wants to throw up the next day.
Right.
Nobody wants the headache, but they want the party and they want the alcohol and they want the buzz, right? And it's the same thing with the sleep paralysis. Nobody really wants the actual event. Nobody likes to be alone in their bedroom with, red eyes glowing and either being pulled out of their body and people, disembodied voices saying we're going to drag you to hell and all this stuff that people talk about. Nobody really wants that. It's absolutely terrifying. But if a week later you're, out fishing with your buddies and you're sitting around a campfire with some beers and you've got the best story to tell, now all of a sudden it's the coolest thing in the world, right? And that's, I think, where we have to kind of be intellectually honest with ourselves, those of us who suffer with this kind of stuff, because I have dealt with a few people that when it came right down to it, you always watch these shows, like these reality shows, like, the shows where they want to lose the weight.
Yeah.
But then when it comes down to it, they don't really want to do the diet or the exercise, but they really want to lose the weight and look hot in the jeans and everything. And it's really the same thing. And I have dealt with a few people where they don't want the paranormal activity anymore. They don't want the harassment. They don't want the sleep paralysis, but they really don't want to give up the attention that they're getting. And And it's kind of what I was saying earlier with my 5th grade teacher, like, oh, I was finally getting this positive attention. We love that. We need that.
Right.
And when you are picking on people who have been in trauma their whole life, or who have been in homes where their parents neglected them, or where they were neglected, or where they were abused, if all of a sudden they're getting all sorts of attention from a spirit realm, from high powered beings,
yes,
saying you're chosen, you have a gift, we need you, even though it comes with a whole bunch of side effects that nobody wants, there's people that don't really want to give up that attention. And so it really isn't as easy as like, hey, Vicki wrote a book on how to get rid of this stuff, because you really have to come to the same place. Whether you're an overeater or an alcoholic, you literally have to come to this place where you're like, I'm willing to give up the buzz because the hangover is worse. And not everybody's ready. Not everybody's at that point yet.
No. And that is really well said, because it's with the paranormal. Part of the reason I did this podcast, Vicki, was to take away some of the stigma. Like, I talked to people who said, I lived in a haunted house. My parents didn't tell me that until I was 18. So they're like spilling the beans. This is that. And there was a ghost, and this is haunted. And because they want to tell you, and I get what parents, I'm being a parent myself. I wouldn't want to tell your room is haunted, honey, because she's going to be sleeping with my wife and I for the next 30 years. And we won't want to get into that weird stuff where that's going. But right. I mean, but on the other hand, I look at it too, where people have told me stories and I've gone, like you said, I just rolled my eyes. Okay, there's a demon in your room. Yeah, all right. Like, if there really was a demon in your room and it's really causing you issues, why aren't you getting the help you need? But then on the other hand, like you said, you have people coming up to you, and I don't know if you can tell this, and if you don't want to tell it, you don't have to, but what was one time where a person came up to you, Vicki, where you were just like, my God, I gotta try to help you? Was there ever a time where someone came up to you and you went like, what can I do for you kind of attitude? Because it was so not crazy, that's the bad word, but so hard to hear, and having, like you said, that empathy separation, but still, you're like, what do I do?
So here's a couple scenarios that I get, and this isn't just germane to paranormal experiences. This could be any therapist or counselor could tell you this. There's this bizarre psychology. If you've had trauma your whole life, you've also probably had a lot of anxiety and depression. There's probably been some self-loathing. There's probably been a defeatist attitude. And there's a point where, for lack of a better word, you become comfortable where you're at, because it's just easier to stay there than it's really difficult to dig yourself out of anxiety and depression. And especially if you've got medication or you've got things that are helping you along, you're getting rid of coping mechanisms and learning to face the fears or the abuse or whatever it was what happened. So one of the things that I've seen a few times, and again, this isn't just in paranormal stuff, but I have tried to mentor a lot of people throughout my life where they are the exception to every rule. So if you're throwing something at them like psychologically, or you're throwing at them like, here's a journal activity, or here's like, because sometimes I think too with anxiety and depression, sleep, water, and good diet, that alone can take 50% away of some of your stuff. Like if you're not taking care of your body on top of it. So there's the people where you start from the most basic suggestions and you baby step your way up to the hard stuff. Yeah. And there's always that category of people where they already know everything you're about to say. They've already heard it. They've already read the book. They've already tried it. It didn't work for me. It didn't work. It didn't work. It didn't work. And when you get all the way up into the echelons of, let's take this from a spiritual standpoint. You go to church, so you want the church answer. Okay. If Jesus can do every single thing in the world and he can empower you and he can strengthen you and he can help you, and he can help you overcome this trauma, or he can help you, find the way out of this deep pit. When you start saying, no, I tried it. Now, I mean, the audacity now of saying that the highest designated power in the universe isn't even powerful enough to help me get over my, love of food or everything that we all go through. It's common to man. Like there's only so many things that can happen to us. And, I am not lacking in sympathy to people who have gone through horrible abuses in life. I haven't gone through those things, but I have gone through trauma. I've been through bullying. I've been through depression. I've been through anxiety. I've been through having to figure out how to pull myself out of a hole and get my life back. I've been through a dark night of the soul. I've been through a nervous breakdown, and so I understand from that standpoint. And so there are the people that they're not ready to be helped.
Yeah.
Another thing that I have seen is, let's just call this the Occam's razor issue, right? So we know with Occam's razor, sometimes the simplest explanation is the explanation, right?
Yeah.
And so I've told this story a couple times. I had a coworker once who was like, well, Vicki, you're a Christian. I have a demon in my room. Can you come and pray over my bedroom? And so I asked her to explain it. And so I told her, I said, honestly, it sounds like you have mice on your walls. And she was mad at me because she wanted this big, huge to do, right? And she wanted this specialness of, I am so important to the universe that all of the spirit realm is turning its forces on me. And I was just, honestly, it just sounds like mice in the wall. And so I didn't go over there. I didn't make a big to do about it. Cause look, if your house isn't haunted and you have someone show up and you could actually conjure things. You could actually not have a haunted house, and you could have one by the time the person's left, when they're, who are you? What's your name? When did you die? Oh my gosh. Right. So anyway, she did end up sheepishly admitting to me a month or so later that they found rat crap all over the place. And it was rat in the walls. Right? So another thing that I'm seeing now is with the younger generations, with Gen Xers and baby boomers, they're a little bit more like, man, look what I've done to myself. Mm-hmm. I weigh 600 pounds because I eat 5,000 calories a day. I got to knock it off. Right.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing with the younger people that come to me, they're way more knowledgeable about the paranormal and the spirit realm and the astral realm and the new age. And they're more knowledgeable about this stuff because we're from the generation of satanic panic. We're from the generation where there was nothing supernatural in the Bible. Right. Yeah. And so, with knowledge comes power, but sometimes you can have just enough knowledge to be dangerous. You don't have quite enough knowledge to actually help yourself. So what I'm also seeing is a lot of times there are young people who are very obviously opening doors in their life that would make them susceptible to seeing into the spirit realm, right? Yeah. If you're smoking pot every day along with high psychotropic medication and you're experimenting with a whole bunch of things and you're going into graveyards and conjuring ghosts, there's certain obvious things. Like if you're doing things that are formulas for communicating with the spirit realm, then you shouldn't be surprised when you're communicating with the spirit realm. But what I'm finding is there are young people, especially in the church, where they don't want to deal with the fact that the door might have been opened through trauma that they're not dealing with. There's a whole bunch of unresolved trauma. There's tons of maybe unforgiveness in your life and grudges and anger that's leading to bitterness and depression and anxiety. And, there are spirits, and whether you use biblical terminology or non-biblical terminology, whether it's demons or it's higher and lower vibrational beings, we all know, whether you're religious or not, that there are entities that have it out for us. They don't like us. They're not our friends. They like to mess with us. And that can be anywhere from just being imps who like to say boo and laugh at us because we got scared, to ones that really want to make us sick and destroy us. And so these more impish, lower vibrational beings, it's like eyes are attracted to piles of poop, right? Like that's just, you're gonna find flies around rotten food and dung, right? Yeah. So if your heart and your mind and your spirit and your soul, if all of the energy you're putting forth is negative, you're bitter, you're angry, you're full of self-pity, you're always a victim, there are flies that are going to be flying around you at all times. You are the proverbial dunghill for these things. And so another thing that I'm finding is there's a lot of people that rather than doing the self-examination, doing the really hard work of dealing with the trauma, forgiving the people that have hurt them, dealing with the stuff that's happened in their life, getting over the addictions and the bad habits and the negative coping mechanisms, rather than looking at the really simple explanation, like there might just be a rat in your wall. They want this super fancy explanation, which is why everybody and their mother now knows all of a sudden overnight what the DSM-5 is. Everybody now knows what the DSM is. Everybody knows that there's this huge book out there with thousands of mental illnesses in it, tailor-made to make anybody in the world feel special. You know, I'm not just depressed. I've got blah, 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 STLMJQ, you know, all this stuff. And,
Right.
And now you've got an excuse to be a victim. You don't have to do any work because you've got this illness, and now you've got this pill that was prescribed you that makes you feel high every day, makes you feel great. You don't have to deal with anything. And so I have heard some really, really convoluted explanations that involve wormholes, portals, time travels, people from other dimensions, like that are explaining the trauma in this person's life rather than just dealing with the mouse in the wall. Like, so, hey, we can do whatever you need to do to survive today, but everybody, and not even paranormal stuff, everybody just has to understand that the longer you prolong dealing with the things and the people that hurt you, the longer you're going to have till you have the healing and the happiness. And I am a living testament, John, and it took me 40 years, and it was very difficult. Without counselors, without psychotropic medication, and anybody can do whatever they want, whatever the tools are in your toolkit you can use. But for me, I just got to a point. My mom died when I was 40, and I determined I am tired of being depressed. I'm tired of being anxious. I mean, high anxiety over everything. I'm tired of the racing thoughts. I'm tired of the chronic fatigue. I'm tired of the autoimmune disease that's come through from all of this. I'm tired of this horrible circadian rhythm and staying up till 3 and 4 in the morning, you know, and then I was just doing everything wrong, but I couldn't get over the slump. And I just decided I've got to get over this. And it came to a head after my mom died. I went through about a 5 or 6 year dark night of the soul. It was really hard to even get out of bed. It probably was what they would have called in the olden days a nervous breakdown, but I did the really hard work. I was a really strict, mean coach to myself. I beat myself up in a good way. And every day I would get up and I would say, like, no, you are not. And I fought the negative thoughts and the anxiety the way I would fight a drinking problem. Like, no, you are not going to take a drink of that thought. You're not going to keep going on that merry-go-round. And I read books I read all these books on neurogenesis, you know, where you can retrain, you can actually pull memories that are stored in your non-conscious into your conscious brain, and you can rewrite them so that the cup is half full instead of half empty. And then when it gets stored back, it gets stored. I went back to places of trauma. I went back and spent a couple hours at the junior high where I had been tormented. I went back to hospitals. I did journaling. I did art journaling. Wow. I read neuroscience books. I prayed. I fasted. I did everything in my power. And it took me about, it hits hard because time blurs, and especially with COVID, 20 to 2023 all blurred into 1 year for most of us. So I would say it started around 2013, and I don't think I really felt better until the very end of 2019. So it was not easy, but I'm just telling people that I practice what I preach. I'm not telling, there's people out there who haven't gotten out of bed in 5 years, you know, and there's a cultural thing in this, John, too. I've read a lot of stuff. I'm going to butcher it because I don't know the language, but in Japan, there's something called like hikikomori or something. I know I'm butchering that, and I'm sorry. It's these kids who will stay locked up in their room for years, and they won't go outside, and they won't see the light of day, and they are terrified of the real world and the responsibility and the weight that their cultures put on them of not only holding down a job, but performing and being a high performer and crushing under the weight of this. And I've been there. If you read the definition of what that is, I didn't leave the house for several years, and I was sort of a recluse. And so I don't often share this at this level, but I just want everyone to understand that between the surgeries and the bullying, life in general, life growing up, puberty, it's all hard for all of us. And then just dealing with all of the coping mechanisms. And then you got the sleep paralysis on top of it. And I was having it 3, 4, 5 nights in a row. And then I'd have it for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then it would go away for a few months. It would come back. This went on for 47 years and increasing in its intensity as I got older. And sleep paralysis affects you psychologically. And a lot of the people I've talked to who have had sleep paralysis their whole life sort of are very cliche case studies. A lot of us, it's a basic diet of horror movies, heavy metal music, dark poetry. You're into all that. And then some people take it a step further. They're doing the drugs and they're doing the other things as well. I never went that far, but so you really lose your identity. And what's really funny is identity is this huge buzz topic now. And we're talking about it like, oh, these poor Gen Zers and these poor alpha generation, and they're dealing with their identity. And people are out there talking about like the only way your identity can be misconstrued is gender wise. But I'll tell you, sleep paralysis can really mess with your identity. And this goes back to what I was telling you at the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm raised in the church. Everything that I'm learning in the home and outside of the home is you were created in an image of God. You are special. He sings over you. He created you in his image. Everything's wonderful. He's got this plan for your life, and he's got this beautiful paradise waiting for you. But then meanwhile, I'm just stuffing my face with horror movies and goblins and zombies and vampires and heavy metal and death and writing death poetry. And I always joke that I'm mad that I'm going to sue because I invented goth like 20 years before there was goth. It was like, and I'm like, oh, how dare you? You know what I mean? And so you have an identity crisis where you don't understand anymore, especially going through puberty. Am I the Christian that believes that Jesus loves me and is watching out for me and is going to work this mess out? Or am I the girl all in black who cannot smile, who glares at everybody who tries to be nice to me? Like, which is it? And it took me 40 years to figure out that the real me really was a kind, empathetic, loving individual. And that all the horror movies and the goblins and the vampires and the black clothing and the heavy metal was my armor. I was just trying to protect myself from being hurt again, right? And so once I had the courage to take off all the fake armor, like the metal t-shirts and the persona of like, what are you looking at? Like once I was able to strip myself of the fake armor and put on the real armor of just being confident and determined. I don't care if it's not cool. I want joy. I want peace. I want rest. I want quiet. I want to get along with the people who are my friends. I want harmony. I want a peaceful life. And once I was able to come to grips with the fact that the highest totem on my totem pole had to be loving other people, forgiving other people, living at peace with myself and others. Because up until that point, the highest totem on my totem pole was self-protection. Yeah. And it was more important to me to not be hurt again than to find love or to have friends or to be liked or to have a livelihood. When the highest thing on your totem pole is I'm never going to let anyone hurt me ever again, it is a recipe for misery.
Yeah. Vicki, that's amazing. And your story is not only fills me with hope, but I hope it fills others with hope who are struggling with this I get emotional over it because like I have a daughter that's kind of similar to you, not all the operations and everything, but she struggles with anxiety. She struggles with self-worth. And, I love her so much. And I have a son who's struggling with ADHD, and he's struggling with autism and other things. And I love them very much. But the main thing, and this goes with everybody, and I learned this later in life too, and this is extremely simplified, okay? So don't jump on me too much, Vicki.
Okay.
Is like, you gotta love yourself first before you love someone else, right? And I know that's really simplified from the elegant words you said, but it comes down to is, and I've said this, I struggle with depression. I've struggled with depression for years. It's been a family thing. And one of the main things is I'll go through these days where I just loathe myself. You're an idiot, and you can't write, and you're a terrible father, and you're a terrible husband, and you're a terrible friend, and you're just, my God, what's wrong with you? All these people are making millions, and you can't even do that. Well, my God, you live in this house that's just, and just right, and just one thing of another. You finally, through therapy, through exercise, through diet, through treating myself right, I said, you know what? I'm okay with myself. I've done this, and this, and I'm okay with that. And, I'm not a billionaire, but I'm okay with that. I'm not this like next big movie producer or something. I'm okay with that. And it's really hard to get there for some people, like you said, because they want the simplified version. They want the 1, 2, 3. Here you go. First step, drink this. Second step, eat this. Third step, do that. Okay, you're cured. Okay, it's done. All right, go out there. And that's never, ever. And I tell this to my children all the time. I said, look, guys, they're both very young. Well, in our terms, I guess, for me and you. My daughter's 19. My son is 22. And I said, you guys are going into a world that is full of good and evil, and whether it be with technology, whether it be with religion, whether it be with certain sciences, and on and on and on and on. And you're going to have to deal with that sometimes on your own, because mom and dad are not going to be there. And I always tell my kids, the biggest thing I always struggle with for them to understand is life experience. Go out there. It's okay to get literally kicked in the balls, figuratively get kicked in the, whatever, right? I was bullied too, like yourself, but not obviously to your extent. But I still was bullied, but I got past. My daughter was bullied. I helped her get past it. But we live in a different world. From me and you, when we were bullied, it's different from today when kids get bullied.
Yeah.
And, the biggest thing, like, out of all this is, in an extremely simplistic view, like I said, is, love yourself first, then you can love others. And also life experience. Get out there, just experience something. And I know it's hard for some people to do that. And I feel for them. I really do. But with my children, I know they can. All right. I know my children can. They don't sit there and are scared to go outside. They're not scared to get a job. They're not scared to talk to you, but they just are kind of sheltered. We live in, they've had a lot of experiences when we've gone out to bigger cities, and they've seen people sleeping on the streets and drug dealers doing drug deals, and they've seen some crazy stuff. And I've always said to them, okay, guys, what did you see there? Was that scary? Was that whatever? And they'll talk to me about it. And I'm glad they do that. But they still, again, they're more sheltered, Vicki. We're not going to experience like I said, the person, they're rolling their cart down the street and that's all they own, what's in that cart. That's it. They have nothing else. And, how do you deal with that, because maybe that person's happy to have a shopping cart full of aluminum cans. That makes me happy and I'm good with my life. And I don't know, it's really difficult. Anything you want in this world, whether you want to become an athlete, or you want to become an author, or you want to become a good father, or whatever, right? It still takes work, like you said. It still takes time. And never try to shortcut it, because it never works.
It does not.
and go through that. So that's amazing. Vicki, I could talk to you for hours. Yeah, you're my hero for all the things you've gone through. And I definitely will use this going forward because I love having guests on like you who have gone through things and it can have real world examples to say like, hey, I've gotten here. Look at me. I still go through things on a daily basis, but I'm still here and I'm still moving forwards. With that being said, what do you have going on here that's coming up for my spooky friends to, check out and stuff?
Absolutely. Thank you. So my website is vickijoyanderson.com. That's Vicki with an I. And if you go on the events tab, you can see all the places I'm going to go. I'm going to be at a few places this year. I'm going to be in Colorado Springs at the end of June. And I think I'll be somewhere in Kentucky and I'll be in Ohio a couple times. So you can check the events page, and the media page has all the podcasts I've been on. Vicki Joy Author is my Instagram, and you can DM me or email me on either of those platforms. And I'm happy to talk to anybody. And it doesn't have to be sleep paralysis or paranormal related at all. If you need somebody to talk to, you're going through this kind of stuff that we've been talking about, I'm more than happy to chat with people. I've got other books. You can find them on my website, but They Only Come Out at Night is available exclusively on lamarzulli.net. LA published that book for me, and that is on sleep paralysis. And there's all kinds of fun stuff in there about vampires and the origins of the sleep paralysis entities and the Asclepions and all sorts of cool stuff you might not expect to be in there. So you can check that out. I do have another book in the works. It is with the editor right now. It's not on sleep paralysis or anything specific to paranormal, but it's pretty fringy. Maybe got a little bit of a touch of AI tech kind of stuff in there. So we'll maybe see that maybe this year, but I'm thinking maybe early 2025.
Nice. Well, please check out Vicki's websites and everything. Like when this episode comes out, I'll put all our links out as well as on my social media. You will see everything from Vicki out there. And please, like, when I've had small business on here, Vicki, and I've had authors, and everything. Stephen King can't get all the money. I mean, come on.
That's right. That's right. You got it.
So, and I love that, please support, our authors, independent authors, if you want to say that, and small businesses, because those are the backbone of the country. And those are the people, like you said, Vicki, you can DM her. And I'm sure she would do her best to get to you and try to help you. And that's, that's really rare in these days that you can do that with some other people we won't get into, but, that maybe they're a little too famous. But that's just, that's their things. We end every podcast, Vicki, by saying two things. One, we say hi to your ghost. So, hello, ghost, because you never know. You might have a ghost in your house. You got to be friendly to them. Maybe going through some stuff.
My goodness. Yeah. Maybe I'm a ghost.
Maybe you're the ghost. Well, hello. And then we say stay spooky.
Oh, stay spooky.
Vicki. Yeah, I'd love to have you back on, by the way. It was amazing.
John. Anytime.
Right. Thanks, Vicki. Have a great one.